Hi there. The book we're going to look at today is this one, Drummed Out by Spencer Leigh. Yet another by Spencer Leigh. And I don't apologize for reviewing so many of his books because he is very prolific on the type of music um, that I like, the Mersey Beat era. And he's certainly one of the foremost writers and historians on that. So that's why he's written so many of the books. And it's interesting to compare this with the book we previously reviewed, The Best Years of the Beatles by Pete Best, along with Bill Harry. Uh, the story of Pete's career in the Beatles and his sacking. So there's quite a few interesting things in it. Right at the start um, of the book, the the introduction, he Spencer Leigh kind of speculates about why Pete was sacked and said there's only four people know with certainty what went on: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Brian Epstein. Apart from a few cryptic comments, the normally garrulous Lennon died with his story. Ditto Brian Epstein. There is much that Paul McCartney and George Harrison can say about this issue, but it seems unlikely that they will do at this later stage. Possibly they will confirm or deny this book's conclusions, but don't hold your breath. Both are skillful at dodging reporters' questions, and in court in May 1998, George said that he used meditation to help forget the past. Very interesting. George was still alive when this book was written, by the way. George, I said before, the Beatles tended to look to the future rather than the past, and that quote from George kind of really encapsulates it. That they wanted to forget the past. The past was a place they didn't dwell. Spencer goes on, the Beatles' literature is also silent on the subject. The contemporary newspaper Merseybeat was subjected to spin doctoring by Brian Epstein. The prolific Beatle biographer Geoffrey Giuliano skirts the subject, while Alan Clayson gives one explanation in his biography of George Harrison and another in his biography of Ringo Starr. Interviewers have missed their opportunities, although to be fair, the issue may not be high in their list of questions. Jan Wenner for Rolling Stone, David Sheff for Playboy, and Andy Peebles for the BBC spent hours interviewing John Lennon and all failed to raise the issue. I can't criticise them as I'm neglectful myself. I had 22 minutes of Paul McCartney's time for BBC Radio Merseyside and never even mentioned their hapless drummer. Add to this that Paul is so damn nice, I suspect that even Jeremy Paxman would submit to his charm and not pursue the interrogation. So really, it has remained a mystery. The book goes into the career of Pete, um, where he was born, um, his mother starting the Casbah Club, uh, the Quarrymen being the regulars there, playing, uh, and then him being recruited into the Beatles and off to Hamburg. And uh, the Hamburg scene uh, is well known. We've covered several books on it, and then they come back, and there is they return to the Casbah, and then there's the famous 27th of December Litherland Town Hall, and there's a really interesting quote in the book about that, about the difference between the Beatles before they went to Hamburg and when they came back. Pete Cook of the Top Spots. Early in 1960, we played with the Beatles virtually every week at the Grosvenor Ballroom in Wallasey. Paul was on rhythm guitar then. He had a Lucky 7, which was a crappy thing. They were a very average band, and I used to think that we were far better. Paul did have a brilliant voice for singing Good Golly Miss Molly, and John had a good voice as well. But apart from that, they were nothing special. They went to Germany, and there was a buzz going round. Have you heard the Beatles? I poo-pooed we played Latham Hall in Seaforth, and the Beatles were on, and I had my arms folded, thinking, "Let's see how good you are." The curtains opened, and they started off with Lucille, and they were so tight and so good that every hair on my neck stood up. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. I know now that they had the drums mic'd up. They had a mic and the bass drum, and they were playing together. Nobody had ever played together before, as everybody did their own thing. I was completely in awe of them. So when they came back and they played the Littleton Town Hall, the promoter was Brian Kelly, and he was um, convinced or persuaded by Bob Wooler to pay them um, more than the normal fee, and he did this very, very reluctantly. But when they arrived and they started playing, he immediately put a doorman on their dressing room door so other promoters couldn't get access to them. They were so immediately recognizably as being well above everyone else. So I just thought I'd make that point because it's something that we've discussed before in these reviews. So Pete's called in. They do the parlophone. It's a quasi audition. They go down and they do that, and there is evidence on the anthology. You can actually hear the recording of "Love Me Do" from that session, and you can hear Pete strumming. And George Martin decides he's going to use a session drummer, and that's really the final peg in the coffin. Pete gets called into the NEMS office, and Brian gives him the bad news: the lads want you out of band, and he's devastated, quite understandably so. His life's never the same again. So um, there's a lot of speculation about the reason why, and there's a whole section of the book, and it's called "Ask Me Why." Beatles song, obviously, and he Spencer very humorously calls it the X Files. Uh, Several reasons. Number one, Pete Best was a lousy drummer, and he goes into that. He interviews other drummers who were on the scene and drummers from other genres of music too. And his consensus really is that Pete was not a bad drummer by any means. Number two, he was not versatile. He goes into that. George Martin didn't like Pete Best's drumming. Brings in the fact that he also brought in a session man to replace Ringo. Ringo Starr was a better drummer than Pete Best. Lots of interview and opinion on that. The other Beatles were jealous of Pete's good looks. A lot of evidence about that. But on the other hand, he added to the band. If he was so attractive to the girls, then that was a plus for the whole band. He didn't fit in with the Beatles. Um, they are on quite strong ground with that because that certainly was a factor. Pete refused to have a Beatle haircut. Mona Best's interference, that could have been a factor because she had actually got them a lot of bookings and she was acting or had acted in a way as an agent for them, and it sort of cramped Brian Epstein's style a little bit. And then he was unreliable, all sorts of other things. So there's a lot of stuff to read, and you can make up your own mind. Uh, Personally, when I read this book, and I also read Pete Best's book, it did answer some questions for me, but The final answer came when I read Lewison's book, Tune In, which we will be reviewing, which is the major work on the Beatles. It's probably going to be the final word on the Beatles' history. It's in three parts. First part only goes up to 1962. It's an amazing book. And as I say, I will review that in detail. And he does, to my mind, answer the Pete-Best question to the best that anyone is ever going to do. Because as Spencer Leigh says at the beginning, there's only a couple of people now know the real reason, and they're not talking. So, well worth a read, and it's certainly an interesting part of the Beatles story.